Hello, it's Kelpessel. I'm here with Dialoriax. The goal of these little interviews I'm doing from the HCAM community is to understand a little bit about motivation and applying some of the concepts of motivation to something that I have a lot of experience in and something very specific, which is HQM. And Dial here was one of our community leaders of HQM. I would say probably the most prolific or most sort of I don't know, iconic, the face sort of for our community of people who, of 200 or so at the max. So Dial, if you would first, just if you have, like, if you want to describe what HQM is for people, and like what exactly hockey question mark is, so they get an idea of what we're talking about.
Sure. So hockey question mark is obviously, as it sounds, it is a hockey game. The kind of big selling point for it is that it's a first person game. So you're never in that third person perspective that you'd get from like one of the EA NHL games or anything like that. And it is 100% skill based in that there's no way to press a button to force your character to do anything. There's no pass button, no deke button, no shoot button, nothing like that. You control every aspect of your character, you control every movement of the stick, and so everything that is part of the game is entirely up to you and your teammates, and it's an incredibly unique experience in the sport video game world.
And how many hours do you think roughly? Because there's no, as far as I know, like not all of us were Steam tracking it, and I still haven't Steam tracked it. So roughly, how many hours would you say you spent on Hockey Question Mark?
Yeah, I never tracked it either, but for a long period of time, I used to even solo practice for upwards of about 2 hours a day, and that's not including the like 2 hours of pubs that I'd play and the hour of scrims plus league games. So there were many nights where I'd spend 5 or 6 hours on the game easily. And I've been playing for 10 years, so I would guess probably pretty easily over the 5,000 hour mark at this point.
And probably closing in on 10,000 hours, which is like the sort of.
Yeah, I would guess it's somewhere, maybe to be more specific, closer to like 7 or 8K realistically, because I haven't played as much the last couple years, but yeah.
So, what initially drew you to playing HQM?
So initially, the big thing for me was that, well, honestly, my computer couldn't run anything else at the time. I was playing League at the time, and then my video card died, and so anytime I tried to play anything graphically intensive, it would fall apart. And right around the same time, I discovered a Reddit post that was advertising the game. And I'm a super competitive guy, as you could probably guess from playing games like League. So this being like an 100% skill based experience was really appealing to me. I'm also a big fan of like team based cooperative experiences too. So, kind of adding those together, plus it being hockey, which I was a fan of the sport in general, was just like the perfect storm of something that appealed to me.
Um, and so after initially playing it, what kept you playing for once you hit that like 50-hour mark or that, 100-hour mark? Like what was keeping you playing it at that point?
Yeah, so early on, it was definitely that competitive nature that I mentioned before. There's something really just satisfying and rewarding about this game when you can finally reach those moments where, like it clicks. You figure out how to take a backhand shot, you figure out how to, stick handle around somebody, you figure out how to hit a puck out of the air. Like those are all pretty formative moments that just feel really good when you get there. So I was constantly like chasing that high, chasing that desire to get better and improve and just become the best version of myself that I could be. But what really ended up selling me for it on the longer run is the grassroots community that built up around the game. And obviously, as you know, I was a big part in helping to foster that. But it was awesome to see this really like close knit, tight community form around such like a small thing, such a niche within niche game that existed. So it was really awesome to see that kind of built up by the community for the community type of thing without even having any kind of developer influence in that. So it was such a just unique experience and a unique time, unique group of people, and I knew pretty early on it was going to be unlike anything else I would experience in my life, and I think 10 years later I can look back and say with certainty that that was definitely the case.
Would you say that the community aspect of it, because you could go to any place, you could bond over any hobby and create a community, right? And it doesn't necessarily, there are different reasons why someone might choose an online community, for example. But obviously, the game in of itself was that draw, and then so was the community aspect of it more about the competition, things like having tournaments, things like having streams, or was it more about being able to share with people the improvement at the game?
I think it's definitely a mix of both. I mean, I tend to be somebody that loves being able to, like I said earlier, kind of like work through problems with other people. That's what I do for my job. I'm a software engineer, so I solve problems, and it's kind of the same way in a weird way, I guess. Solving problems as a team for like, how do you beat this team you're playing against? How do you, play against players that might be better than you? And kind of that like learning experience, that growing together. And the further I got into it, being able to then, take those experiences as learning opportunities for myself and then help others grow in the same way was just something that was, super rewarding, super fun to be a part of. And I wouldn't trade that for the world.
So I was doing some research and connecting my thoughts about it to like motivation, basic motivation theory and stuff. Again, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm more interested in it in sort of the, like I said, creating a story out of it.
Yep.
One of the things that people talk about when it comes to competition and what motivates people to engage in competition. And actually, before I jump the gun, when you view your time as HQM, do you view it as mostly a competitive, like, is it fair to characterize it as a competitive experience? Like that is what the essence of it was, like a competitive community?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty fair because the North American community was really built around the competitive leagues that we had in the LHL, the RSL, and the JSL. So that was really the foundation, and I think a lot of what kept people coming back. The game itself is great on its own, obviously, but being such a competitive game, what I think really speaks to a lot of those players is being able to showcase what they've learned, being able to showcase that talent, that ability that you've, built up and curated over the years and doing that in a format against other players of similar skill, and that being kind of the ultimate prize of being able to stand there at the end of a best of seven overtime, whatever the case is, right, and be able to say like, yeah, we did it. I am the best right now. We are the best right now.
Um, so in that vein, because there's lots of research on athletic competitiveness, and competition, which makes sense because obviously there's going to be more money in that. But there is definitely, obviously, this is analogous and very similar, if not the same thing, to athletic competition of all sorts. And not every athletic competition has a huge audience, right? Like some people will be athletic competitors and spend as much or less time than we did playing this game and have less of an audience in some sense, right?
Mhm.
But again, this is different. But so you don't have to answer this. Like, feel free to not answer this or feel free to answer it to whatever extent you feel comfortable. But very commonly for athletes, they have their sense of self worth is intrinsically tied to their ability to compete and their ability to be better than others. And that is a huge driving force in motivation. Did you find at any point that your ability in this game, not specifically in this game, but your ability to be good at games, or perhaps the intelligence required to do, as you said, like to find out how to beat somebody or to solve a problem. Do you consider those things part of your concept of self worth? This is a leading question, and what I'm trying to get at is, did you derive a sense of self worth or self worth fulfillment from being good, quote unquote, or good at HQM?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think it would be dishonest to say that that's not part of it, right? Like you mentioned, for pretty much anybody doing something competitive, especially in the world of athletics, that tends to be a driving factor, especially amongst the people that reach kind of the pinnacle of their sport or their competition. So that's absolutely part of it. For me, I tend to be the type of person that's very self-motivated with things that speak to me, things that I'm passionate about. My goal is to always, be, as I mentioned earlier, the best version of myself. And the opinion that matters the most for me is, I guess, for my own self worth, is my opinion. And as much as I would love to be able to sit here and be like, oh yeah, everybody thinks I was the best player ever, so therefore I was successful. At the end of the day, what matters more is whether or not I think that was the case. And that was really a lot of what drove me for so long. Um, the further we got into it, though, the more and more invested I definitely got in the community side of things, because again, that being such a unique experience that you don't necessarily get from, a typical sport or athletic competition, you don't really get that sense of community, that sense of camaraderie built up in the same way. So being able to help foster that, being able to help push that forward and grow it into what it became and sort of its like, golden age or its peak, like you said, around 200 players or so, 3 leagues going, and was it, I think 16 teams at the time or something like that. May have even been 18. Like that on its own was probably the most rewarding part of all of playing this game beyond anything that I did on the ice.
That's interesting. So I'm gonna have to separate. I'm gonna have to try. Like what I'm thinking about is separating, but I can't really. It's not really possible to separate the drive and the motivation to continue to serve people or to continue to bring people together or to continue to talk to friends and community members, and then the desire to simply keep playing because those are they have to
They
be
go hand in hand.
connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's interesting, and I wonder if that's the case. I mean, I'm sure that's the case. I mean, humans are very social beings, right? So I guess that's the case for anything. The other,
I'm a super social person. Like a lot of the people that I met here, 10 years ago playing this game, I still talk to. And I would firmly believe I'll still be talking to many of them 10 years from now. And it might not be people that I speak to every day, but they're still people that I consider to be good friends. They're people that I have met in person, in some cases numerous times, and would love to continue to meet and get to hang out with. So there's nothing quite like I guess, the connection that I think a lot of us developed through embracing and experiencing the competitive side of this. But again, that camaraderie component that goes hand in hand with that came from this game and this community.
do you think um, when you were practicing, your thoughts, what was driving you on a day by day basis to sit there for 4 or 5 hours? Was it the next competition? Was it the next season? Was it the next game? Or was it that feeling that you were just going to keep getting better and that it was a process based kind of practice?
I mean, I guess it's a lot of reasons. Like I said, I always wanted to be the best version of myself, and like obviously there is incentive there as well. Being part of a team, like you want to perform the best you can for the rest of the team too. In a lot of cases, I was expected to be kind of the offensive carry. I was always one of the favorites to be MVP every season, stuff like that. So to a certain extent, you want to live up to the reputation as well, live up to people's expectations of you and also your own expectations of yourself. And that was a huge part of driving me to play the game that frequently. But the other component that I haven't mentioned pretty much at all during any of this, which I think kind of is really the baseline for doing anything, as much as I've played HQM, is really that it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, the gameplay is super fun. I had fun even just messing around in a server by myself, which is actually ironically what I'm doing right now, and just trying new things, like trying to do different stuff that maybe I'm not good at, or things that I've never tried before, and trying to see how I can push myself there to become a better player. So a lot of that really all comes together, I think, to really form the basis of what my internal motivation was, and I guess even today continues to be to some extent.
Right, that's interesting. The more you answer, the more I just trying to think of trying to connect all the things. So then, just to clarify, let's imagine a world where you're the only one who can play the game. Is that something that you play for longer than an hour? Like if it's only single player, like how long does that last?
Yeah, it's a good question. If it's only single player, I mean, again, it's still fun, but I think it would be tough for me to kind of measure myself in the same way to say, like, am I getting better at a certain point? because you can do a million different things when you're by yourself in a rink with nobody else on there. But part of the big satisfaction comes from being able to do those things when there's nine other players on the ice and the puck is, spinning all over the place, and the unpredictability of the game, the unpredictability of the people you're playing with and against. It's kind of putting all that together, fitting all those pieces of the puzzle together that make it such a special thing. So realistically, would I have played it anywhere near as much? No. Would I still have gotten on it every now and then and had some fun? Yeah, definitely. But you're also taking away the community when you do that. It's not just the competition side of it. It's not just the team versus team stuff or the leagues. It's the people you play with, the people that you get to spend 3 months of a season with, trying to learn how to play well together. Losing all of that is a huge part to take away from the game in that circumstance, and I think that would ultimately be the biggest, I guess, demotivator there.
Okay, so I've more and more questions are coming, so I'm just going to keep them going.
Yeah, go for it.
So for me, when I played, I really empathize with something you said about you have a team and you don't want to let them down. So there were times in my playing time where I was in different levels. I was either the person who was expected to carry or the last person to make the team. Which
Yep.
and in both of those scenarios, it was because of the other people around me that I felt the need to practice, and it felt like a need, almost like I was going
Yeah.
to let people down. Would you say that that's a good characterization of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure part of that stems from the fact that I'm the type of person, like I think many people are, that wants people to like them. I mean, I have no problem admitting that. I know some people do, but I definitely want to be at least not disliked, I guess, right? So, being able to live up to those expectations, being able to not let people down makes you feel good, or at least not like a failure. Like what would make me feel worse is not just playing poorly. It's playing poorly and knowing that, that's my fault that our team lost. If this was a 1v1 game like something like StarCraft, I think it's a different story. But when you've got a 5v5 circumstance, as a forward, as a carry forward in particular, if we lose a game like 6-5, I'm probably going to feel like I could have done more and should have done more in that circumstance to win, because that offense really should be coming from me. And I think that's, something you have to consider when you're in that position. I know you mentioned you've gone through it as well, so I'm sure you kind of know what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, for me, I felt my two biggest maybe I should interview myself at the end and add it on. But the I found that the two of the biggest motivators in terms of purely practicing the game in order to get better, like to isolate it to that specific reason to play the game, was, yeah, to either carry my team and to be what people expected, or to be what people didn't expect, and was to be better than what people were saying I was. That kind of proving
Yeah,
people
that's
wrong, which
that's a really fun one. Like that for me, season one was very much about that, season one and season two, because I joined as a brand new player for LHL season one, which was July of 2013. I'd been playing the game for like less than a week when that starts. And we have players in there like DMB, Otto, Dalfan. I know not all of those are on the same tier back then, but some really good players, right, that have been playing the game for at least 6 months. And as you know, that's a huge
yeah.
advantage of time, especially that early on. So, seeing those guys pop off and play really well, I wanted to be able to prove that I could do the same thing. And I wasn't just another one of the, lesser new guys that's there just to kind of fill a roster spot. I wanted to take that. I wanted to earn that, and I wanted to, I guess, deserve that. And being able to go through that progression in particular, like season one to season two, where I had basically the same team members on my team both seasons, being able to go through that together and go from being fifth seed to being first seed, despite only having like one roster change, was really, really satisfying and really rewarding. And that remains one of the most rewarding things that I went through, at least from the competitive side of things, throughout my whole 23 season career.
So I want to frame this in a way that allows people, and maybe allows us all to think about it in a sense. So you said 2013, so that's
Yep.
that's 10 years. and it was around 8,000, 7,000 hours over the course of 10 years, with the majority of those hours coming probably in the first 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, yeah, first like 6 years. Yep.
That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time to put into anything, and it's a lot of time specifically within the niche of a niche, as we talked about. Do you view that as a negative thing? Because there's a stigma even within, I think, even within our own community to acknowledge how long that is, and how much time that is. Do you have like a sort of regret about spending that much time in like a sort of like a I could have been playing the piano for 8,000 hours type of way, or does that enter your mind at all?
It doesn't. A lot of people have told me stuff like that too in the past. Like, why are you this dedicated to the game? Like, if I was that dedicated to something like, I don't know, a more popular game, even if you're trying to keep it in video games like League of Legends, I maybe would have gotten really good and potentially gotten at least something out of that. But I don't regret a single minute of it. And, would it be nice if it kind of meant more, I guess, maybe sure. But like I said, I've gotten some lifelong friends out of playing this game, and first and foremost, that means the most to me. I've gotten some amazing memories of different accomplishments with different people, getting to experience different, funny, silly, or in some cases, really emotional situations going through with my teammates. So those are memories that I'll hold with me for a really long time as well. And on the whole, I think the most important kind of life lesson that it taught me, or playing HQM taught me, is really to just appreciate what you have while you have it, I guess. And I think, we all kind of struggle with that at times, myself included. But there are plenty of times where I could kind of step back and just realize that, like, this is pretty crazy that this is happening given these circumstances. And I think that's pretty special. And to have something like that I can kind of, reflect back on even now at the age of 30 and think of fondly is awesome. And I guess one last underrated component of it too, which I never really thought about until we started talking in this discussion here, but being a part of this community and being a part of this game, I think really taught me how to be a leader. That's something I do for a job now, but obviously back when I was 20 and starting out the game, that was never even something I would consider. And I learned a lot about how to lead other people, how to guide other people, how to, work out situations where not everybody's getting along or seeing eye to eye. And that was done in, not necessarily a real world scenario, but in some cases, I would argue a more difficult scenario with people online that have a veil of anonymity and no, need to be, I guess, held to a certain standard, right? Like they can just disappear and go away and not have to, to stand by what it is they say or do. So being able to be in that environment and learn how to lead people like that and in that situation is a tremendous skill that I don't know if I would have learned elsewhere.
Okay, that's, you're getting to, you got to where I wanted to go with it in a lot of ways. The only other, probably only have a probably only one or two more things that I wanted to touch on. The first one being something that came out of what you were, that last answer that you gave, which was, and I'm going to try and frame it in such a way because I'm having difficulty presenting it as a question. So my framing and my discussion jump off point for it is there are so many people who do hobbies and spend large amounts of time on them, and for whatever reason, some are valued more than others, whether that be monetarily or otherwise. So money would always be a goal in the world we live in. That's fine, but there are obviously things outside of money that are important. So would it be a fair sort of thing to say, like a fair characterization or statement that you agree with, where you don't feel like you were wasting your time, or that you lost any time, because this hobby is as valuable truly as like any other one, in the sense of personal development, growth, fun, which is important because you're not at work, So would you say that's a fair characterization of a reasoning behind not feeling negative about the time spent playing this demo of a game?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I got a lot out of it. And I think at the end of the day, if you can get something positive out of your hobbies, even if it's just being able to enjoy yourself with a little bit of downtime, as long as you can get something out of it, it's not wasted time.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And so the goal here for me is going to be to collect people's approaches to it and to explain explain why they might spend a large amount of time on something like this, right? So just to wrap it up, I'll give you the final question, and you can take as much time as you want if you need to think, and in the sense of if you could wrap it up in short and sweet, in concise, what factors we've talked about them already, but just to sort of put a bow on it, what caused you to spend all this time in this particular game?
Yeah, I guess trying to summarize it's kind of difficult, right? But at the end of the day, the biggest thing for me is the community that's built up around it. Again, that kind of like grassroots style where it's not some artificially inflated thing. We're not all here because this is the new flavor of the month game. We're all here because we genuinely enjoy it. We genuinely have fun, which is that second biggest component. And it was a game that allowed me to really kind of explore that competitive world, that competitive environment on a platform that I was, obviously good at, but also one that really spoke to me on a personal level. Having such a vested interest in hockey, having such a vested interest in really high skill based games and cooperative environments in general. So it ticked all the boxes for me in all those aspects. And at the end of the day, that was just the perfect storm.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Um, I'm gonna speak with some other people. Oh, um, just for fun, I just thought of this. Do you think there are reasons that other people that I'm going to talk to, and you don't have to be specific about it, like you don't have to say, well, this person's going to say this. Do you think there are other reasons that people are going to say that you didn't connect to? Like, do you think there are other things that are going to be really important to other people that you didn't talk about?
I'm sure there are. I would, I'm sure everybody has their own different reasons for why they play, but I would be willing to bet a lot of the ones that you'll hear are, again, that competitive nature, like I mentioned, the fact that it's fun. And, you might hear community from other people. I don't know if you'll hear that from quite as many, but the first two I definitely expect you to see a couple of times. But I'm interested to hear what you end up getting from everybody else that you talk to, because I know not everybody's going to have that same kind of social tie, that community tie, as somebody like myself does, or you will.
Right. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. And I thank you for your time. And it ended up being a little longer than I wanted it to, but I mean, that's okay. I'm sure I'll include all of it because it was all pretty valuable. And it's interesting. I think that the reason I think it's interesting is because I don't see a lot of exploration as to why people do, like the amount of people that spend tens of thousands of hours and stuff. It's very rare that you actually get to hear why someone does that, and it not be about something that makes money. You know what I mean? So I just thought it
Yep.
was interesting. So
Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I'd be happy to do anything like this again. So I wish you the best of luck with the other answers you get, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results at the end.
thank you. All right.